specifically within the Afro-American subculture, some things are taboo. You don't talk about them, right?
Right.
You put them in Pandora's box and you lock it and you throw it in the water, right?
And it floats back up anyway.
At some of the most unexpected times.
Yes, it does.
And let's go back to the church. You know, I've said many times before, no one has the spiritual and moral authority to provide instruction and guidance to families than the church, better than the church. You can't legislate morality, and you cannot legislate what is appropriate, right? And we could talk about spirituality, but the truth of the matter, in the society we live in, there are some civic expectations. Socially, there are some things. But if nobody teaches you that, how can you be held accountable to them?
Exactly. I mean, I have, you look at it in a direction of who's teaching us now.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the reasons I used to curse my mouth saying, oh, it's just too big, you just talk too much, but I finally realized,
Don't do that.
no, that was the Lord's gift. That was one of his gifts, that you are supposed to continue to educate and talk to people and give guidelines that were second nature to us because we grew up with them.
Right.
But there are people now that don't. I had a young lady in my office the other day, she wouldn't get off of her cell phone. And I'm trying to explain to her that this is, you know, I can't communicate to you because she was a child. This isn't a grown-up.
Right.
And her grandmother was in the room with her, and we had to end the visit because her phone was the most important thing, which made me know it's not the phone that's an issue. It's this child doesn't have any sense of authority or respect of it, and she's so concerned about what her issues are, she doesn't want to talk about them.
Right.
And so when you are placed in that position, it's really a limited amount of help that you can give someone when the communication is just so poor. But in all relationships, communication, I have found, is absolutely the most important thing, and it's the one thing that I think we're least skillful in.
Okay. You're a woman, I'm a man. How does a man respect or approach a woman in the most respectful way?
I'm the authority on that. I don't know.
I don't know.
He's putting me on the spot for real. You know, I think everybody has a different comfort zone.
I don't mean to be rude, but because I think that part of what has to happen in terms of education is mothers need to teach their sons that there's an appropriate way you engage and you communicate and you embrace. You understand what I'm saying? Help me with that like I'm 3 years old.
Spot moment. I didn't expect that one.
Well, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. But I just think if we're going to use a scenario of a mother talking to her son, approach a young lady like you would talk to me.
I see.
Because if there's respect to that person, you can easily transfer it to someone else.
So now, Doc, you're shifting the paradigm right now. Because you're supposed to see a woman as somebody that's going to ingratiate you and satisfy you. And you know, mama, her cornbread is good. The green beans and the potatoes, that's all right. But now we put mama aside, and now we got a different function.
Y'all don't get off mama's couch. No, but you're right. You're right. It is a different approach, surely. However, if I tell my patients a lot, especially young people that are trying to figure out, well, what do I do with this new guy? How do I handle this? And what I remind them is, most of the time when you're looking at trust and love, you've looked inside your family. And you've had years of an establishment of what love and trust means. And unfortunately, when we see someone and we're infatuated, we just shift all of that love and trust to someone we barely know.
I see.
And I ask them to consider giving it some time, because that laugh that you think is so sweet when you first meet them, you might in 3 months not be able to stand that cackling. And if you don't know someone, you don't know how to deal with it in that way.
That's a great point, because a lot of times people think that expressions of love is about what I can give you, as opposed to giving it time to define itself.
Exactly.
Because you don't know that. As you pointed out, you don't know, you really don't know one another. So how do we get from just seeing one another to something as intimate as becoming one. You know, at what point do we cross that? Where's the boundary?
And a lot of people are looking for just that.
Yeah. What is it, do you think, from a health perspective, that the church can do better to engage themselves in this important fight of letting our young ladies know that you're precious, as you pointed out so beautifully? God made you in his own likeness and in his image, and he has a specific purpose. What can we do to really...
Well, I'm calling on the Lord right now myself. And actually, I just think, look at what Jesus did with women.
Okay. Wow.
When you look at how he related to women in the Bible, it was absolutely unique for a Jewish male authority. And he engaged them. He wanted them to hang out at his feet and listen to his words.
Doc, you changed the paradigm again.
Just telling you, ask me, what could the church do?
That is powerful.
But actually, and Jesus was trying, in my view, was trying to get people to see that women were valuable too.
Right.
God saw all of his children as important, as Genesis 1 made them in his image defines. And so I know it was a patriarchal society, and in a lot of ways we still have one. Women actually get to work and own their own homes, but we still depend and listen to what our men, our male figures, especially those who are ones we trust, have to say. And women value that. But unfortunately, especially with advertisements in the entertainment industry, a woman's sexuality seems to be all that is on the table. Absolutely. And when I'm speaking to young ladies, I have to remind them, your sexuality is a very small part of you. Right. What about your heart? What about your elbow? What about your artistic skills? And when you start breaking it down into that, it helps a light bulb go off in their heads so that they can see, I can demand more than some of the things that people are trying to offer.
So it is in order to demand these things.
I think it is.
Yeah, I appreciate your focus there, and certainly that's needed. Sometimes there's an imbalance between our spirituality and our natural life and our walk, and I appreciate you bringing that spiritual flair even into your style of practice.
That's the only way I can do it now. He's opened the door, so I've got to walk on through.
Well, praise God. I'm glad that you've done that. We've come down to our last 5 minutes. Is there something in particular that we'd like to share with the public today that you think would be of importance?
Well, I gave a talk as we mentioned when we were talking to each other earlier before I actually came, that I did a lot of, well, I still do a lot of sexual health and STD, HIV awareness in the community. And one thing, I gave a talk several years ago, and it was titled Love Responsibly. And if you're talking about sex and STDs, of course, the first thing people think about is not at all what I'm talking about. But actually, love responsibly means you love someone in a responsible way. So if you are a parent, you need to consider some of the things that you're saying to your children or images that you are implanting in them. And sometimes we get frustrated, we're tired, and we just want to say the fastest thing to get someone to leave you alone when your boss has been on your back all day. But you have to remember that sometimes that gentle no or not right now is stronger than, or it will have a better impact than saying something negative just to get them to leave you alone. If you are a preacher, recognize that none of us got here without sex. And in order to make sure that you have healthy relationships in your congregation, because there are women and men that suffer in silence because they're too embarrassed to come and see what your opinion is going to be. Because we're human, whether we're preachers, teachers, Indian chiefs. So we have to be able to take our biases out of conversations sometimes to love responsibly.
Okay.
If you are,
I wish I could have made. I'm sorry I missed that. That was like wonderful.
but I think Love Responsibly is just an easy thing for people to remember, so that when they're in a moment and it is someone that they care about, no matter what the circumstance, if they stop for a second and say, am I loving this person responsibly when I make this conversation, then maybe I should hold my tongue.
Wow.
Because that's what Jesus really was talking about. Loving your neighbor is loving responsibly.
Are you still doing these presentations?
Yes, I am,
Okay.
whenever I'm invited.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So,
I actually
so you're
enjoy
open to coming to congregations?
Oh, absolutely.
Or community centers? And that
Community
sort of thing?
centers, Boy Scouts,
Okay.
children's
Okay.
groups, grown women's groups.
Right,
I
right.
actually have had the pleasure of speaking with a couple of NFL teams to talk to the rookies, and that's a very
That's
interesting conversation.
wow.
But I love it because the men are very, very engaged and have a lot more education about some things than the media will lead people to believe. So,
Right, right.
yeah,
Wow, that's pretty good.
I'll talk to anybody that listens.
Okay, okay. And tell us where your address is for your name of your practice and your address.
I'm Staphanie Sweet, and my practice is Renaissance Women's Center.
Okay.
And I am located at 2900 Felicia Street, Suite 101.
Okay.
And
Okay.
like right off of 28th in Charlotte.
Great, great. And you've been there for about 2 or 3 years
I've
now?
been at that location for 2 years now.
Yeah, but you've been in the Nashville area practicing
For 11 years.
11 years. We appreciate the fact that you've come and you've shared with us. We have to have you come back.
I'd love to. Thank you so
Okay.
much for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for being here. And thank you, listening audience, for joining us on the Building Families and Community Show. We will be back with another episode and look forward to having Dr. Sweet come back with us again.
I'll be back.
All righty.